songs of praise. Our God save.
Good morning, church. Welcome. Hey, everybody. It's been such a chilled morning this morning. I know these guys over here are going to be like, no, it's not. It's just been really nice just getting to hang out with people this morning and say hi. We are having church a little bit different this morning. As you can see, we don't have a band. As we're very limited on guitar players, Kerry's not well, so that just kind of cuts us down a little bit. So we're going to have our worship on the screen today. We're going to be having videos with lyrics, but it's just going to run as a normal service, the rest of it. You'll be able to see it all up there. As you can see, we're going to do communion as well, and junior church will happen, and the preacher's happening, so it's all pretty normal. So in my preparation for this morning, I was meant to be leading worship today, and I just didn't have a real sense of what we were going to do. Normally, I feel like, okay, this is the song we're going to focus on, or this is the theme we're going to focus on. I didn't really have that. Clearly, God had different plans today, which is probably why I didn't have that in mind. But we're going to do a new song today that's called Jehovah, and it's such a good song. It's really easy to learn, and it talks about a few of the names of God. Jehovah in the Bible is the Hebrew word for God, and quite often throughout the Bible you see it with other words, so it describes his character, and we're going to have some of those in the song. And I was like, God, why are we doing this song? Why is this one that keeps coming back to me? It's the only thing I had a really strong feeling for today. And so I finally found the verse in the Bible that I wanted to match what I thought. You know when you're like, there's a scripture about this, but I don't know what it is, and I can't find the right wording. And I just really felt strongly that God wants us to remind ourselves of who he is, so that in those times when we need to remember that he's our healer or he's going to fight our battles, we've got that in our arsenal. We're ready with that information. So in 2 Peter, verses 3 and 4, it says, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. That's not the verse I meant to read. Give me a second. It is a good verse. It's a great verse. But it's not the one I wanted. 3 and 4. Yes, it was 4. That's what we wanted. And because of his glory and excellence, he has given us great and precious promises. That's what I wanted. These are the promises that enable you to share his divine nature and escape the world's corruption caused by human desires. And then in verse 12, therefore, I will always remind you about these things, even though you already know them and are standing firm in the truth you've been taught. And it is only right that I should keep on reminding you for as long as I live. In this letter, it's a letter from Peter. He wrote this, and he's saying, I will remind you. But I really felt that God's saying, you need to remind yourself of these things. Like you're talking to yourself. I love this. I am going to remind myself of the promises of God. I am going to remind myself of who he is in these situations. And in junior church, they are looking at the promises of God today as well. So, fabulous. I love this. Thank you, Lord. No, not at all. Lovely. So, if you're able, please do stand. As I said, worship's going to be on the screen today with all the lyrics and everything. You'll know most of the songs as well. If at any point you want to come and share, come and grab the mic. Wendy knows how to pause the videos.
On. Good. It's just saying, like, oh, wow, we're really loud. This book here is just so good to sort of spend time contemplating, and just gives you a moment. Like, I'm not really a book person, but sometimes when you open a book, you can't do anything else, right? Like, you can't read and watch telly at the same time or something like that. So it's good to, reflect on it. We're going to take communion. I'm going to pray, and then we'll pass around the bread. You can eat it straight away. Just thank God in your own time. And then I'll do the same with the cups, and you can drink it whenever you want. And then I'll start preaching. Lord, thank you for the sacrifice that you died on the cross for us, that we are ridiculously unworthy, that we're someone that is going to disappoint you time and time again, and you said it doesn't matter. you said, because of my blood is finished. Thank you that your love covers everything. And so when we remind ourselves of this at the communion table this morning, help our minds and our hearts to be thankful and give adoration to you for what you did for us on that day. Thank you. Okay, again, just want to spend time thanking you, Lord, for everything that you did. Thank you that our sin is washed clean by the blood of the Lamb. And that might sound weird and that might sound religious lingo, but what it means is Jesus set us free. It means that we're guilt-free, sin-free, and we can live an abundant life through him. And Lord, thank you that you open that door for us. Amen. So I feel like I probably need to do notices before I get into the preach, because knowing me, I'll get into it and then like, oh, I forgot the notices. So let's do that first, because I never do that sort of thing. There is a couple of things going on. So first thing is do we have them? Yeah. Leafleting after church. We have an amazing Santa's Grotto, and we let the people just around us know that it's happening. And so if you're able to stay literally like 15, maybe 20 minutes tops, literally go round. The more people, the better, because then it's quicker. It's funny, because when I was a child, I felt like leafleting took absolutely forever. And the last few years, I'm like, wow, this is so quick, because there's like 10 of us doing it, which is great. But yeah, definitely, it's something great to promote and talk about. And I realise, I think David Tate was supposed to talk about this. Did you want to talk about the grotto, David? Sorry. Did you want to talk about it? You can talk about it. I don't know what I'm doing.
Now, just really quickly, this is one of the big things in our church. I think it's partly because we happen to have someone that looks like Santa. But, you know, an opportunity to get 60 families come into God's house and feel the love of God's people is something that is really special. So despite the fact that it might sound bizarre, banal, and whatever else. This is something that's really important. And we literally start preparing. So me, Sam, Roz, and Kerry have started preparing this one in about April this year, because it takes a lot of organisation. So anyone that feels like they've got any skills they want to contribute. So we start going into full swing. So on the 30th of November, I think is a Sunday. That's the first Sunday of Advent. We'll be decorating the church with Christmas decorations. Then in the week before, we'll be doing work days throughout to get the grotto set up. Yeah, so the grotto is on Saturday the 13th, but the week before we'll actually be putting it up and breaking down Sunday school. So there's a load of jobs to do, and this is just the first job, which is shoving these into our neighbours' letterboxes, because it is a way that we can really bless our community with the love of God.
Okay, so I have my different hat on now. I've got my Chair of Trustees hat on. Sizewell, we are hoping to go away as a church to Sizewell. Those of you that haven't been before, it's a huge manor house up in Suffolk that's been converted to a Christian conference centre. It's got a beach right next to it. We have a service once a day, and then the rest of the time is yours. There's breakfast, lunch and dinner provided as part of your cost. And yeah, we'd love as many of us to go as possible. The reality of it is we do not have enough people at the moment. And if we don't get more people, we won't be able to go. And we'd love to do it. It's such a good time of fellowship as a church. So if you guys have not already signed up and given us your deposit, please do. We need it very, very soon. We have to start paying Sizewell as of January. So that has to start happening. We need to have that money first. We will lose our slot if we for the next 2 years' time, because they Sizewell keep it for us every other year, so we would lose our slot completely. If you know friends and family that would like to come away on a holiday, it's not particularly religious. It's not like a Christian holiday. We have the service once a day. The rest of the time, you can do what you want. You can fellowship. There's communal areas. There's the beach. There's places to go to around there. So if you know of other people that would like to come, please do let us know. But the reality is, if we don't have enough people, we cannot do it because the church cannot afford to fund it. So please, if you haven't given us your deposit, we need your names really soon.
Great. Yes, you can. No, yes, you can.
Just a really quick one for next week. David and I won't be here next week because we are travelling up to Scotland for David's dad's funeral.
If we all take a 2-minute prayer for the laptop. That's what happens, isn't it? Technology on its finest of days. Are we? Do we all need to do that? That's fine. I can, if not, I'll give it like 1 more minute. If not, it doesn't matter. Yes. No, sorry. Have you? It's fine. It's all good. We'll see. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Do you know what? I reckon we'll start. Let's start. It's fine. We'll see. Oh, we're there. Oh, see, just as I'm super keen. Yeah, nice. Thank you. We're gonna watch a video. Thanks, guys. See you in a minute.
The Book of Esther. It's one of the more exciting and curious books in the Bible. The story is set over 100 years after the Babylonian exile of the Israelites from their land. And while some Jews did return to Jerusalem, remember Ezra and Nehemiah, many did not. And so the Book of Esther is about a Jewish community living in Susa, the capital city of the ancient Persian Empire. The main characters in this story are 2 Jews, Mordecai and then his niece Esther. And then there's the king of Persia, who's something of a drunken pushover in this story. And then there's the Persian official Haman, the cunning villain. Now, this is a curious book in the Bible, mainly for the fact that God is never even mentioned, not once, which might strike you as kind of odd. I mean, isn't the Bible about God? But this is a brilliant technique by the author, who's anonymous, by the way. It's an invitation to read this story looking for God's activity, and there are signs of it everywhere. The story is full of very odd, quote, coincidences and ironic reversals, and it all forces you to see God's purpose at work, but behind the scenes. Let's just dive into the story. The book opens with the king of Persia throwing 2 elaborate banquet feasts that last a total of 187 days, and it's all for the grandiose purpose of displaying his greatness and splendor. On the last day of the banquet feast, he's really drunk, and he demands that his wife, Queen Vashti, appear at the party to show off her beauty. She refuses, and so in a drunken rage, the king deposes Vashti and makes the silly decree that all Persian men should now be the masters of their own homes. Then he holds a beauty pageant because he wants to find a new queen. This is like a really bad soap opera. But it's right here that we're introduced to Esther and Mordecai. Esther hides her Jewish identity and enters the beauty pageant and wins. And the king is so obsessed with Esther that he elevates her to become the new queen of Persia. Now, after this, and even more serendipitous, is the fact that Mordecai just happens to overhear 2 royal guards plotting to murder the king. And so he informs Esther, who in turn informs the king, and Mordecai gets credit for saving the king's life. Now, right here from the beginning, God's not mentioned anywhere, but this all seems providentially ordered. What is it that God's up to? You have to keep reading. We're next introduced to Haman, who's not actually a Persian. He's called an Agagite. He's a descendant of the ancient Canaanites. Remember 1 Samuel chapter 15. The king elevates Haman to the highest position in the kingdom, and he demands that everybody kneel before Haman. Well, when Mordecai sees Haman, he refuses to kneel, which of course fills Haman with rage. And when he finds out that Mordecai's Jewish, Haman successfully persuades the king to enact this crazy decree to destroy all of the Jewish people. And to decide the date of the Jews' annihilation, Haman rolls the dice. A die is called pur in Hebrew. Tuck that away for later. 11 months later, on the 13th of Adar, all the Jews will die. Haman and the king then have a drinking banquet to celebrate their really horrible decision. So the focus now turns to Mordecai and Esther, who are the only hope for the Jewish people. They make a plan that Esther's going to reveal her Jewish identity to the king and ask him to reverse the decree. But approaching the king without a royal request is, according to Persian law, an act worthy of death. So in a key statement, Mordecai, he's confident that even if Esther remains silent, that deliverance for the Jews will arrive from another place. And then Mordecai wonders aloud. He says, who knows? Maybe you've become queen for this very moment. Esther responds with bravery, and she purposes to go to the king with her amazing words, if I perish, I perish. Now, in what unfolds, we watch the ironic reversal of all of Haman's evil plans. So Esther hosts the king and Haman at a first banquet, and she says that she wants to make a special request of both of them at an exclusive banquet the following day. So Haman leaves the banquet totally drunk, and he sees Mordecai in the street. He fumes with anger, and he orders that a tall stake be built so that Mordecai can be impaled upon it in the morning. It seems like things can't get any worse for the Jews and for Mordecai. But all of a sudden, the story pivots. It just so happens that night, the king, he can't sleep, and he has the royal chronicles read to him for good bedtime reading, and he just happens to hear about how Mordecai had saved the king's life. He had totally forgotten. So in the morning, Haman enters to request Mordecai's execution, and the king in that moment orders Haman to honor Mordecai publicly for saving his life. So now Haman has to lead Mordecai around the city on a royal horse, telling everyone to praise him. Now this moment in the story, it's a pivot for the whole book. It begins Haman's downfall and Mordecai's rise to power. Watch how this works. The day after is Esther's second banquet. So the king and Haman arrive, and Esther informs the king that first of all she's Jewish, and second that Haman has enacted a decree to murder her and to murder Mordecai, who saved his life, and to murder all of the Jews. Now the king's had a lot to drink, so when he hears this news, he goes into yet one more drunken rage, and he orders that Haman be impaled on the very stake he made for Mordecai. It's ironic and a grisly way for Haman to go. Haman's execution, however, doesn't solve the problem of the decree to kill all of the Jews. So the focus now turns to Esther and Mordecai as they make a plan to reverse the decree. They discover that the king can't revoke a decree that he's already made. So instead, the king commissions Mordecai to issue a counter-decree. On the appointed day that all of the Jews were supposed to be killed, the 13th of Adar, now the Jews are ordered to defend themselves and to destroy any who plotted to kill them. Then Mordecai, Esther, and Jews everywhere hold banquets and feasts to celebrate this new decree, and Mordecai is elevated to a seat beside the king. Eventually, the decreed day comes, and the Jews triumph over their enemies. First, they destroy Haman's family, and then any other Persian officials who had joined in Haman's plot. And then on a second day, they get permission to destroy any who plotted against them throughout the entire kingdom. This results in joy and celebration as the Jews are rescued from annihilation. The story then tells about how Esther and Mordecai established by decree this annual 2-day feast of Purim to commemorate their deliverance from destruction. And the name of the feast comes from Haman's dice. Remember, Purim. The book concludes with a short epilogue as Mordecai is elevated to second in command in the kingdom, and we are told now of his royal greatness and splendor as the Jews thrive in exile. Now, step back. Notice how this whole story has been designed. The story was full of moments of ironic reversal.
I don't understand turning things on and off. So the reason it's a long video, but the reason is there's so often times one where if a preacher is talking about a story and you have no idea, then nothing makes sense. So I'm like, it's good to sort of give you an overview of the book of Esther. But also because I really felt for a long time, but felt like going back to basics is also sometimes really helpful. And I personally often overlook stories that I've learnt in junior church because I'm like, oh, that's for junior church and I'm an adult now. But that's a load of rubbish. And so sometimes it's really good to kind of reflect on stuff that maybe you've learnt as a kid or not at all, and tackle it together. I can't remember what my first slide is. Cool. So these are our little drawings, if you don't know who the characters are, right? So I'll be showing these drawings throughout, so memorise who looks like who, and thanks, Roz, for that. The reason I'm talking about Esther is because this last year for me, God has been talking to me about Esther. And a couple of years ago, I did a preach about a whole year that God had worked on me and done something in my life. And he did it again this year. And I just wonder whether it's saying that I take a year to actually get something that God's trying to tell me. But I'm hoping it just means that we've all got to be patient. But so this preach, again, might look slightly different. It's kind of like a testimony and a preach in one. But I did this a couple of years ago, and it felt right, and it feels right now. So bear with me if it doesn't follow the norm pattern of a preach, but I think it's relevant. So we've heard about the story of Esther, and that video gave you kind of an overview of a timeline of what it's a 10-chapter book and what happens in those 10 chapters. And similarly, I want to show you guys an overview of what's happened to me in the last year. So we're going to look at almost 2 timelines together, Esther and mine. And the reason for that, again, is sometimes we can read things in the Bible and think that they're not relevant to us. Like, things that say, like, be patient, or God provides everything, or, it's like, oh, okay, I understand why that's relevant for me. But often stories that you read and you think, well, none of that's happened to me. It can be really difficult to grasp, like, okay, is that just a story in the Bible and those things happened because it was the time, and I don't understand. And the stuff about my life is, the direct stuff. Or is it that every story in the Bible is intentional and we learn from all of them? And that's the one I believe. And so what I'm hoping to do by the end of this is to get you to see of how potentially things in your life might look like a story in the Bible. And it's funny, I love that the video said it doesn't mention God once, because we have to look deeper than that. And it's important to reflect on our own situations and think, God, like, I can see you in this story, and I want to see you in my story. And that's what we're going to kind of try and focus on today. So the last year has looked difficult for me. And some of it you might already know. Some of it I've kind of scattered throughout testimonies throughout the year. And I kind of want to put all the jigsaw pieces together. My work this year has been incredibly difficult for a number of reasons. And I'll obviously explain why. But what's interesting is this journey literally started on the 6th of January. And now it's like November. So it was basically almost a whole year of things going wrong, being difficult, challenges, and me throughout going, God, what on earth is going on here? Like, I know you're faithful and I know you're this and that, but I'm not seeing it in my story. And I think this is why God brought Esther to my attention. So it started in January, as I said, and I started the year knowing that I had to talk to my boss about some changes in my work calendar. So instead of working 2 evenings a week, that wasn't going to work with childcare for Joshua. And so I had to basically ask my boss for quite a different contract working arrangement than all my other colleagues. And I didn't know how it was going to go. And it turned out it went absolutely dreadfully. It basically, when I spoke to my boss, it ended in a very aggressive conversation, feeling very undermined and constantly feeling like I was under a microscope. And since that meeting in January, all my work was looked at like no other colleague. So I had to do timesheets when no one else had. I had to do certain things that no one else did. I was asked significantly more questions about every single move that I was making. It was really, really intense. So February comes around and I have a meeting with my manager and the deputy to put in a formal flexible working arrangement, because I'm like, I can't work in the current contract that I've got. And within 24 hours, it was rejected. Like, straight up, just no. And at that point, I thought I was going to have to quit my job. And a bit of context, if you don't know, I was in mat leave. I'd come back in the September, and then by February, I'm like, I'm going to have to quit my job. This isn't going to work for me anymore. And I really felt like God had put me in that job for a reason. And now I've just come back and I'm like, I think I'm going to have to pack it all in. So put in the flexible working arrangement. The 20th of March comes around and I have an appeal meeting, because it got rejected, to pitch why I needed this childcare arrangement and why this was so important. And the reception I got from it was pretty poor. It was very much like sort of a conversation, sort of me trying to pitch an appeal, but the panel basically looking at me like, I don't know what you expect me to do here. Like, your boss has already made a decision. We will talk about it, but I don't know what's going to happen. Then 2 days later, a few of us went to a women's conference called Rise, and I really felt like God said, this is where you're meant to be. And this is where the whole kind of story of Esther was slowly being revealed to me from this moment, so from the 22nd of March, and it started to resonate with me. And so have that in your mind, have the story of Esther in your mind. We're going to read little snippets as we go along. So if we look into Esther 2, verse 12, it says, before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. Now, that must seem really weird to you, because I don't think I've ever prepared for a meeting for 12 months. I don't think I've ever gone to a spa for 12 months. Maybe I need it, I don't know. But the concept of that is incredibly alien. But the first bit of the jigsaw piece, oh, that's interesting, I felt God was revealing to me was about preparation. And this must have seemed so weird to Esther, this idea that I've got to coat myself in these perfumes and oils and go through beauty treatments. I can only imagine it felt a little bit like, am I not enough? What is the point in all this? What am I even doing this for? Is this even right? Is this the norm? And is it really necessary? And I literally can't even sit in a bath for half an hour before getting bored. So I cannot imagine 12 months of this, on and on and on. And it was all to prepare Esther to see the king. And no matter how long or tiresome or confusing it would have been for Esther, this was what had to happen in order for preparation to meet the king. And the reality as well is that she didn't know how to be a queen. She didn't come from a royal family. She didn't come from any, she didn't go to queen's school to know what was about to happen. And so again, it was this time of preparation that must have seemed long, but was necessary. And the first thing I was thinking of when God was talking to me about this story of Esther and me and our lives in general is that we so often want to skip past the prep. That so often it's like it's something that seems monotonous or unnecessary, or or even it's so boring that you don't even notice it. But God says it's necessary. And sometimes when we need to see the King, as in Jesus, it's not that we can't ever present ourselves as worthy enough, but it's about the preparation to go, God, how can I prepare my heart? How can I prepare my time, my actions to see you, to see what you're doing in this moment? And so one of the things I really wanted to get across was about the preparation. This was the first jigsaw piece in the puzzle that God revealed to me, that it's not worth, you can't skip past it. It has to happen in order to see the King. And it's interesting because I probably never really realised all of this. Well, you never really realise anything in the moment, but basically from January to March was preparation for me in my job. Preparation for what was to come. Similarly to almost how Esther had to prepare herself and God was preparing her for what was to come. The second piece of the jigsaw puzzle was talking to me about it's important how you show up. And again, this is spoken about in Esther 3. So we're reading Esther 1 to 2. And it says, after these events, King Xerxes honoured Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honour higher than all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honour to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honour. Haman seems a little bit of a strange character. He is a very egocentrical, it's all about me, aren't I fantastic? But again, if we're looking at kind of the parallels between our lives and the book of Esther, imagine Haman is something or someone that is trying to steal your time, is trying to influence you, trying to get things to do. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about influences and voices around us. And Mordecai notices this, and he knows he's a man of God and doesn't give in to it. He looks at it and goes, I know who my God is. I know this isn't the right thing to do. You're not worthy of the kind of adoration that you're demanding, and therefore I'm not going to submit. That in itself was a lot. It was a lot because what Mordecai had to do was think about, do I care more about God or do I care more about this person that's going to make my life difficult? And so often I think, again, it's easy for us to choose the easy route, especially when it comes to workplaces, families, convenience is more desired than the difficult route. But Mordecai was a man of God, and he was consistent in that. He was consistent in, when we read actually in chapter 2, so sort of towards the end of chapter 2, it talks about Mordecai telling the king about 2 people conspiring to kill him. In that moment, Mordecai's showing his character. He's showing his level of honesty, where he stands on the side of right and wrong, where he's doing what God is placed him for, to be that kind of like voice of truth. So he's that same person then as he is in chapter 3, where Haman's demanding something of him, and he's like, no, you're not worthy of that. That's not what I'm going to do here. He's consistent. And again, that takes a lot, because there's so much truth in the Bible that as human beings, because we're sinful and do the wrong things, we ignore. So for example, the Bible is very clear about saying do not lie. But I can almost imagine, if we're really honest with ourselves, every single person in this room has told a lie at some point in their life, and will probably in the future. Whether that's over-exaggerating something, whether that's kind of trying to save someone's feelings, so we're not going to say the whole thing, but because it's the easier route, right? It's comfortable. It makes our lives seem easier. So sometimes I think it's really interesting to reflect on a character like Mordecai, to think, how do I keep consistency? Because God is consistent. God is the one that is steadfast, never changes. And that's the God we serve. And so when we want to look more and more like Jesus, we want that consistency. I don't know what clicks I've got. Yeah, okay. So we're on my timeline. So then April, May rolls around, and I'm waiting for a decision about this appeal. I'm waiting for arrangements to happen. And in the meantime, almost all my colleagues were gossiping about me. A few of my colleagues had gone to my boss specifically to say nasty things about me. And a lot of people were looking around me and thinking, or even saying, and this isn't even hypothetical, this is real, saying, do you think you're better than us? Like, you're asking this, what makes you so special? And I remember thinking, and at the time wanting to react so easily and break the consistency of what God is calling on my life. And I heard him say so clearly, how are you showing up? And it was about how am I going to show up to work every day and show Jesus' character? What do I want people to see when I show up to work? Is it someone that's erratic, out of control, annoyed, anxious, all of the stuff that I am feeling? Or is this a great opportunity to show Jesus? And I can't say I got it right every day. This isn't me standing up here being like, oh, wow, I'm so amazing. But it's God that's the amazing one. God is the one that was working through me. And almost every day, this question would be asked of me. And it's a heavy question sometimes to ask yourself and reflect on, how are you showing up? Like when you're meeting your family members, when you're meeting your friends, you're meeting your colleagues, you're going to the shops, like every encounter that we have is an opportunity to show Jesus. And just like, I think Mordecai, when he told the king and did the right thing, and then again with his actions towards Haman, he's showing the character of God through him. He's showing what we all need to sort of hold ourselves to. And again, it's crazy. As I kind of had these of this word saying over me, how are you showing up? How are you showing up? I remembered, and I double checked with her, this was real, this memory is correct, that years and years and years ago, Ronnie stood up here and told a testimony about how she was, her boss wasn't treating her very nicely because she wore a cross to work, and how she felt it was really important and significant to wear a cross to work, even though her seniors were telling her, if you don't do what we're asking of you, consequences are going to happen. And that can be a really scary place to be. And I think in some way that was the place that I was in my workplace. I'm like, if I show up consistent, if I show up trying to be joyful, to settle my kind of inner anger, trying to just stay calm and do what I'm supposed to do and do it faithfully, I'm going to get people that aren't happy about it. I'm going to get people noticing and going, again, like, why do you think you're better than us? And it's just, I don't know, like, I just think it's such a powerful thing to think about how you're showing up every day. You know, some of us are quite outward in kind of our actions. So Ronnie with that cross, I wear a cross to work. A few of us have got tattoos that are Christian related that are very obvious on our bodies to show. And the intention is there to go, Jesus, I want you put in the conversation. I want you to be in the center. And that's how I'm showing up. And so when God was kind of giving me Esther and reflecting on it, I thought, wow, okay, that's quite a challenge. The third piece of the jigsaw puzzle that I felt like God was saying was about doing the right thing and it being courageous. And sometimes the right thing is very uncomfortable and has a lot of consequences. And so we see that in Esther chapter 4. And we're reading 2 to 14. I'm going to have to click at some point. This is going to go up. Right. We're pressing buttons on the laptop. My bad. Okay, yeah, so 4:12 to 14. It says, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. Okay. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Oh, it's all on there. Good. Okay. And again, this is something that I suppose these verses are repeated over and over again. I see it on social media. You see it a lot on like women's conferences or, I don't know, Pinterest. You see it a lot. And sometimes it doesn't really, it kind of doesn't mean a lot. It sounds more like you're in this big position and you're placed in it, and it's often used for like empowering women, I think, like this verse. But I felt like God was saying it was more than that. The first thing that Esther does when she hears about this, do I have her again? No. Is she prays and fasts for 3 days to seek God. So before she makes any move, before any kind of contemplation of, oh, blimey, I'm going to have to do the tough stuff, God is the center. Like, she prays and fasts first. And again, it goes back to the preparation is key. That when we want to meet the king, when we want to hear from him, preparation is key. And so Esther obviously hears this from Mordecai and knows that it's not just her at risk, it's her family, it's her, the people around her, and it's God's people, and feels like, I should say something. So then, this is the one that has 2 clicks. In Esther 7, 1 to 6. What are we up to? 3. Okay. It says, so the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favour with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. Click. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Now, just like the video said, this is not an easy task for Esther at all. You know, I suppose a bit of context is the Bible, in this kind of time, women weren't even seen as someone who should even have an opinion, anyone who should be worthy of having such a big idea or saying things out loud. So not only has she got the thoughts of, I'm a woman, I'm probably not going to be listened to. She's also got, and now I have to talk to the king about it, and I want to approach him without doing all of this prep, knowing that if this turns sour, she's in a lot of trouble. And that, again, is a super scary place to be in. God will put us in situations, and again, it might not seem you're in this exact situation. You're probably never going to be in a situation where, well, this will be fun, but you're a queen and you've got to speak to the king and it's all, you know, very formal, but it might look like you have to call someone out when they're not being very nice, or you have to act a certain way that other people aren't going to appreciate because you know it's the right thing to do. And doing the right thing sometimes is scary, but what's great is God sees the end from the beginning. He sees everything. And so there is no situation, none, that God doesn't already know about, that God hasn't already seen, hasn't already designed. And I'm sure in this moment, Esther really hoped God had picked someone else. But he didn't. He prepared her. He shaped her character. He put the right pieces of the jigsaw puzzle around her for this moment. And this is the moment that is often reflected on because it's pinnacle. Because every day we should be asking ourselves, which route do I want to take here? Do I want to take God's way, the right way, or do I want to take my own way, the easy way? And again, we are all going to pick both of those paths. There is no one in this room, there's no one watching a live stream that will get the same answer every day. Because it's scary, because the enemy wants to fill us with fear, with anxiety. But I think if you reflect and you know in your heart of hearts and you're seeking God and asking him what the right thing to do is, he will reveal it to you. Joshua 1:9 says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever. That means God was with Esther and Mordecai in the preparation. He was there and put Mordecai in the right place to hear of this plan, to earn favor with the king. God was there when Mordecai said to Haman that he's not going to bow before him. It's not right. He was in the conversation between Haman and King Xerxes where Haman wanted to get rid of, and they made a lovely, stupid decision to get rid of the whole, like, of the Jewish community. And he was with Esther when she approached the king and had to pluck up every bit of courage to speak to him, because she knew who the actual king was. It's Jesus. Proverbs 28:5 says, evildoers do not understand what is right, but those who seek the Lord understand it fully. No, I haven't got Esther. Esther knew what the right thing to do was because she sought God first. And again, if there's ever a situation you're in where you're like, I don't know what the right thing to do is, God is always the answer. God is always the first one you should seek. It didn't go unnoticed that Esther not only herself fasted and prayed for 3 days, she also asked Mordecai and her community to do the same so they could all seek God together. So we're at this point in Esther where she knows what the right thing to do is. She sought God, she's thought about it, and then approaches the king in quite a scary way. And again, this isn't for me to say that my difficulties was anything like Esther, but again, it's that comparison of trying to get you to see what might be going on in your own lives. So all throughout June, July, August in my work, I just kept plodding along. I was just doing the same thing. I was working hard, probably harder than normal because I was trying to prove myself all the time. But I just kept showing up every day. And every day I'd wake up and the same question would be going over and over in my head. And every day I'd try and seek God and say, God, how do you want me to present myself in my workplace today? And mostly it was the same answer every day. Which was my child. And I knew what that meant. It knew I had to show up in a certain way. So then, around sort of like the end of Augusty time, maybe the start of September, my whole work contract or my whole working arrangement was looked at again. So I'd gone through a meeting once, I then had to go through basically the exact same meeting again a few months later to talk about my work schedule, to talk about how I was going to make it work with childcare, and I asked the same question. And I went back and said almost the exact same things I did last time. Nothing had changed. I didn't come in with any like anger or malice or anything like that. I just asked the same thing. And I think some of that was because I felt God was saying about consistency, again, going back to Mordecai, of that kind of like, you're the same person in all these situations. I knew God asked me to be the same person in all these situations in my workplace. All whilst I then had my colleagues and other people around me at work trying to convince me that my boss was an absolutely dreadful person, that she's like conspiring against me, she's got it in for me, you should put a plan together to attack. I'm not like, I wish I was joking. That is literally what my colleagues were like at this time. I guess because they didn't know what was right. You know, again, in that Proverbs verse, that those who seek the Lord fully understand, I knew what God had asked of me. And so with my colleagues gossiping and doing all sorts that I just didn't feel was right, I tried the best I could to be consistent and do what God had asked me and do the right thing. So September rolls around, and towards the end of September, I have a very awkward and difficult situation where one of my other colleagues makes a massive safeguarding breach. One that is not just a minor thing, it was pretty serious. And I was given some information and I had to decide at that point what I did with the information. And there could have been two paths that I went down. The first one could have been I could have just kept it to myself because I didn't want to seem like a gossip. I didn't want to seem I didn't want to make my colleagues hate me all more than they already did. Or I could have done the right thing and reported it, and that is what I did. But I knew that was going to open me up for something worse to come. Almost like, I suppose I wonder in Esther's mind when she's about to approach the king, how he's going to take it. And I kind of thought the same when I was bringing this situation to my boss. I'm like, I don't know how she's going to take this. I don't know how well this is going to be received, but I do know what the right thing to do is. And that was really scary. And again, going back to the jigsaw piece, that doing the right thing takes courage. I genuinely felt like I had to muster all the courage I possibly could in order to essentially make this report. But what I said earlier about the Safeguarding Sunday, about the Bible and Jesus is very consistent in looking after vulnerable people, I believe that's what was happening in my workplace. That God was putting me in this position because he cares about the vulnerable and he cares about the people that aren't protected or are defenseless. And I felt like it was the right time, that God had put me in that time for a reason. And there was a reason why I had got the information no other colleague had. So I don't know why the jigsaw piece is like this. But the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle, as this all was slowly being revealed to me, was this amazing truth and reality, is that what the enemy means for evil, God turns for good. So when we read on in Esther, it's all in Esther 9. I don't think I've got a... No. In Esther 9, again, it said it on the video, we read about Haman. Obviously, Esther's basically outed Haman, and Haman gets executed for it. And there's this really weird, ironic parallel, again, sort of what the video was saying, about how Haman was the one that was protected. He was the one that was favoured by the king. And then by the end of Esther, Mordecai is that person. And again, Haman was the one that was sentencing the Jews to death, that was sentencing Mordecai to death. He even made a specific place for him to die because he thought it was that powerful. And then by the end, Haman actually dies in the same way that Mordecai was supposed to die. It was planned in a really ironic and strange way. And just like at the start, where there was a decree where all the Jews were to be destroyed, there was now a decree for the Jews to be saved. And so there's just this constant back and forth with what God is doing and what it starts at, and then seeing the end result and the end story and all the pieces kind of put together. Oh, I should have put that up, sorry. In Genesis 50:20, it says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And so throughout the Bible, God is doing this. He's going, I know this doesn't seem good right now, but I'm going to reveal something to you and do it for my glory. And that's how Esther finishes. And it's really difficult because sometimes, I know personally for me, I want to see all the jigsaw pieces. Hang on. Come on. I want all of this to be revealed in one. But it's not how God works. God takes situations and works through the process because he knows what's to come. And he knew what was to come, and he knew why Esther was so key in this time. And he put her in the right positions, he put the right people around her, and revealed what is the whole book of Esther. And so, what do I have after this? Okay. So that concludes, and by the end, God is showing that actually he's more powerful than whatever was intended for evil, and he turns it for good. And the result of my job, do I have it? Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I did these all separate. Okay. In October, so we've just hit November, so in October a couple of weeks ago, I think I gave a testimony about this. Basically, the decisions went through with my appeal, and I got a letter through to confirm like the decision. And the decision for my work was actually that they were going to agree to every childcare arrangement. They were going to agree to every adjustment that I'd asked for the first time, and even more so that I was going to get like a tiny promotion, so something that was kind of managed by all the staff. My boss went, I think you're capable enough to manage it all by yourself. And you've got some good ideas, and I've seen that, and I've seen the work that you're doing, and so I think you're the right person for the job. And all throughout that, I was told, when I had this letter, then I had a phone call, and I'll be really honest, I keep hearing it consistently now from my boss, which is, the reason you had this was because of your character and because of how you stayed consistent and how you portrayed yourself despite the difficulty. Like, you didn't kick off screaming and being like, this is unbelievable, and being really bitter at work. You turned up, you showed up every day, and you were consistent. And I don't take any credit for that, because that 100% is God. Like, none of that was my own ability to go, look at me, I'm a great worker. It was 100% God working on my heart, preparing the space for me to know I needed to do the right thing, to then prove that to my boss, to then get into this point now where we're in November, where my story ends. And so sometimes when I suppose my encouragement is, by the end of this year, I'm looking back and incredibly thankful to God for what he's done in my life in this whole year, but it's taken a whole year. And so sometimes God's plan for you isn't one that's quick. Tough situations aren't one that's going to, you pray and overnight it's solved. Some of them do, that's amazing, that's miraculous, but I often find God takes his time, because there's stuff that needs to happen beforehand for it to bring him glory at the end. And so my closing reflection thought would be, take some time this week, this month, to look for God, look for what he's done in tough difficulties, in times of nothing's happening, in times of change, in times of happiness, like all of it, because God's in all of it. God's in every single one of those moments, and there will be things in your life that haven't even happened yet that God has already designed for you. There's people that you're going to talk to, there's encounters that you're going to have, that God has put you in those positions and made you the person that you are for those exact times. So don't let them miss you. Like, don't pass them by, because God's using them. So, yeah. I'm going to pray, then we're going to have tea and cake and fellowship. Lord, thank you, Father, that you are in the midst of everything, that every situation you turn for your good and your glory. And that's not because you weren't aware of what was happening beforehand. You just know the plan. You see it all. You see the beginning to the end. Lord, help open up our eyes to seeing you in our daily lives. Open up our hearts to, when we read the word, to go, oh, how is that happening in my life? Lord, be patient with us for the times that we don't see you. Be patient with us for the times that we're feeling a bit lost. We're feeling a little bit like, I don't know where to turn. But Lord, bring us back home. Bring us back to having our eyes on you and to know where to go next. I pray a blessing over everybody that's in this room, everyone that's watching online, that they would have a blessed week, that you would reveal yourself more and more in every day of our lives, and we become closer to you. In your name, amen.